Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, this is The Metro, a slice of news, culture, and conversation. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Today on the program, social media platforms have long been fountains of misinformation.
So in addition to listening to public radio, how else do we stop the flow of misinformation? Return to the facts.
We'll talk to some experts who study the different corners of social media, and we'll take your calls. Are you tired of trying to discern fact from fiction?
Plus, we'll take a step back in time and meet some of the black soldiers who fought in the Civil War, but haven't been recognized until now.
That's right. Nearly 200 years later, the American Civil War still contains a lot of untold stories, a lot of nuances and politics that were at play. However, most of us are familiar with the history, some of it, some parts of it. The Union, mostly northern states, went up against the Confederates, mostly southern states, to fight for what were, at the time, states' rights to choose. It was truly the battle for states in this country to preserve the right to enslave human beings. And with the prospect of freedom and liberty, hundreds of black men, enslaved and free, joined the army to fight for their rights.
Warriors for Liberty, William Dollarson and Michigan's Civil War African Americans is the latest book in a series dissecting the Civil War and Michigan's involvement, co-written by Michigan Civil War Association and Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey is a native Detroiter and author and historian, has written multiple books about the history, war, and how it all connects to the broader human experience. Jack has joined us in studio today. Jack, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Such a fascinating topic. We often get lost in the whole idea of the American Civil War, that we don't look in details, in depth into what was happening. So you've been researching and writing about wars in this country for some time now. And as we talk about the American Civil War, when you began to research, did your hypothesis or questions begin looking for answers regarding black soldiers, or did you stumble upon it?
Well, I began my interest when I was very young. So certainly by age 8, I was fascinated by the period, watched TV shows, had books that were given to me. And so it's been a lifelong thing almost. But when I turned 50, just a few years ago, seems like a moment ago, I began to think, well, what about my home state's role in the Civil War? What did Michiganders do? I really didn't know much. So about 20 years ago or so, I began to dig into that and just found a treasure trove of history that really hadn't been told well yet. And that's been kind of my avocation until retirement recently, and now I'm full-time retiree investigating this. So.
Which, congratulations on retiring.
Thank you.
My dad's retired, and I know he lives the life right now. So
it is the life, yes.
Yeah. So, Jack, just listening to it, you loved it since 8 years old. This has been a lifelong journey of learning and researching and understanding. So when we talk about black men, black involvement in the Civil War, where were some of the things that you were starting to see, some of those first points where you were like, okay, this is interesting. I didn't know this was happening.
I always felt, based on my reading, that the war had a lot to do with slavery, as I think your intro suggested. Why did some states try to secede from the Union and form their own nation? Principally because they were fearful that an incoming administration would take away their ability to hold people in enslavement. So they preemptively tried to withdraw from the Union, and those in the North especially who embrace this idea that Union is sacred and our Union is perpetual, we just have to keep trying to make it better over time, resisted that. So that's where the war came about. And then halfway through the war almost, about January 1st of 1863, that's when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by President Lincoln. And I knew about that. I knew that was a seminal event in the war. But really, the story underneath that, what did African Americans, how did they view the war? Did they try to get into armed services before that date? what did they do afterwards? And so the answer is yes, they did. There was actually a physician in Battle Creek who wrote a letter in 1861 saying, let us raise troops, we'll fight on behalf of the Union. And that was delayed. It wasn't permitted until 1863 when, here in the Detroit area, the publisher of a newspaper got authority to and then began to raise a regiment of black soldiers. And their story, I think, over time was known but then not really appreciated because they didn't fight at Gettysburg. They didn't fight in some of these major battles. They weren't on the march across Georgia. But what happened with them is they were sent down to the deep South in uniform to guard the coastline and then to be put into battle, fighting Confederate troops just like those of European ancestry fought. But here they are in the deep South where if you're captured, you're wounded and captured or whatever, you're not going to be treated most likely as a soldier whose skin is much lighter is going to be treated. And that happened several times. There's a famous incident at Fort Pillow in Tennessee where black troops surrendered and were basically murdered by the Confederates. So aware of that, these men still signed up. And I might add that even before that happened, before the 1st Michigan Color Regiment was enlisted, Michigan blacks enlisted in other units, including the most famous probably, which is the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, which is the unit featured in the movie Glory from, I think, 1989 or 99. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's my first introduction. I think a lot of our first introductions to the black involvement of the Civil War is through Glory and watching that and, getting to the end of that film and really just having to sit with those feelings and sit with that the reckoning of what it was all happening during that time. So who were the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry Regiment? Who were these men? What were the makeup of these men? I know we had this interesting thing happening in the city of Detroit during this time where you have the European involvement, you have indigenous involvement, you have the Underground Railroad cutting straight through. So it's just so many different things that are moving at the time. But who were these men?
They were all free in Michigan because slavery was not permitted ever since Michigan became a state under the first Constitution. But some of them were formerly enslaved. Many were from Detroit, but the population in Detroit of blacks was fairly small, relatively speaking. And so this unit went out on a recruiting mission across lower Michigan, all the way over to the west side of the state. So you can really think about black men from the lower tier of Michigan who heard the call and responded and came forward to put their lives on the line for blacks, but also for everyone else and for this nation. So they are patriots. They are heroes just as anyone else who volunteered or who was drafted and served. And so that's the story I think that we need to really appreciate, that they volunteered. They put their lives in danger. Some were killed. Some died because of disease. That was rampant during the Civil War. And so it's a great hero story. And it's not just a story of those who enlisted, but there were others who supported that, people at home, the families at home. And then as we describe in the book, this individual, William Dollarson, is an incredible story. His account, his life has not really been known. In fact, his co-conspirator in the Underground Railroad, Seymour Finney, is the one who's more famous. He's the white owner of a hotel in Detroit in that era and a barn in which escapees were hidden until they could be carried across the Detroit River to Windsor. And William Dollarson is part of that story, and I've been fascinated by him for 10 years. So when you go to historic Elmwood and you go to the section where there are blacks and whites, soldiers buried together, I think it tells you what this war really was about. But then there are other graves, other individuals who did great things. And William Dollarson, a citizen, never enlisted, couldn't in 1861, but was invited to be part of the staff, the command staff, Brigadier General Alpheus Williams. Williams' statue is on Belle Isle. It's still there. He's a great hero. I wrote a book about him, which that's another whole thing. But here's Williams and his staff inviting the civilian former slave, escaped from slavery, Underground Railroad conductor, to be part of this effort. And where were they stationed? They weren't at Fort Mackinac. They were stationed in Maryland and in Virginia, both slave states. William Dollarson's 50-ish years old, and he goes off to help this staff. He's a renowned chef in Detroit, and he becomes part of that, goes back south of the Mason-Dixon line and puts his life on the line. So what's all about that? Why would he do that? Because he wanted to participate. He couldn't put a uniform on, but he did serve the cause. And to me, he's just as much a hero as anybody else who fought.
As a statue on Belle Isle, you know?
Well, Dollarson should have a statue.
Yes, he has.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
He has a gravestone in Elmwood with his wife. And once you know these stories, once you go visit a site, whether it's a battlefield, a hospital, whatever it is, or a grave, and you stand there looking over the grave of William and Maria Dollarson, and you think of this couple, you think of what she went through as he was gone for over a year in harm's way, and his life, escapee. He owned a farm near Royal Oak. He was part of the Underground Railroad. He was a preacher. He was just this great individual who did not let circumstances dictate his life and future. He had a dream, to use that phrase that I heard a lot this week, of a better America, and he wanted to be part of that. So you stand there, I don't think you can look down and see those names and not get emotional. And even if I go there today, I will still feel that here's a hero that I owe a lot to, and we all do.
You're listening to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're chatting with historian and author Jack Dempsey about Michigan's African American Regiment in the Civil War. When you tell this story, Jack, I think about for us as journalists, when we're trying to piece together a story, we have to often talk to dozens of people to make that narrative come together. But for a historian, you don't always have the luxury of talking to dozens of people who were there. How do you piece together a narrative like this?
What's great today is the ability to do a lot of research online. There's so much available, original primary sources that you can visit on your laptop, no matter where you are, at home, coffee shop, office. So that's really what our series is about. We're trying to exhume sources that have not been looked at or have been overlooked, whatever you want to call it, and bring them to light. So in the book, for example, there's a first-person account of the race riot that occurred in early '63 here in Detroit. Reading that first-person account, which has been available, it's been in libraries, in the comfort of your own home with your tea, your coffee, whatever, I think is such a powerful testimony to the reality of that era, of what happened, what people went through. So we look for primary sources online. I have some great people assisting this effort who love research, going to secondary sources, books that have been written on the topic. Very few on, for example, the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry, but there are several that have just come out and are coming out about this regiment. So it's exciting to be part of this effort here in the 3rd decade of the 21st century, where we're finally learning a lot more, and part of that is because of the availability of research materials that date from that time period.
And when we talk about learning a lot more, I wonder from an institutional perspective, I'm thinking about schools. Do you see the tide turning? Do you see things changing in terms of what young people are learning? I know you're going to be speaking to some students in Grosse Pointe today, for example.
Yes, but that's because of the interest of an individual, the teacher, who's responsible for that class, who is interested in this area, fascinated by it, and who wants his students to learn that. I read studies, I read newspaper accounts suggesting that the level of understanding and knowledge on the part of, we'll say, K-12 students today is not very robust. I believe when I was going through school, back in the good old days, as they say, we learned a lot of history. We learned dates and so forth, and that's a problem. But when you learn these stories, when you learn the themes in American history or world history, it really becomes more powerful to you. My hope is that teachers, school districts, educational institutions, citizens will want to become much more familiar with the history here in Michigan. We should be very proud of our history. There's none better than us as Michiganders. So it's up to us, I think, to try to educate in every opportunity we have about the past. The past is prologue. It forms the basis for where we are today and can inspire us for tomorrow, such as the stories in this book.
Jack Dempsey is a native Detroiter, an author and historian. His recent book is Warriors for Liberty, William Dollarson and Michigan's Civil War African Americans. Jack, thank you so much for joining the Metro.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great privilege.
The WDET newsroom. Several water mains across the city have burst due to frigid temperatures. The Detroit Water and Sewerage Department has 11 crews out addressing the breaks. The department says residents should keep their thermostats set to at least 55 degrees to avoid their pipes bursting. There have been no service outages, but some people may experience low water pressure.
Coming up at 11, we'll discuss how social media platforms handle false information, how that's been changing, and it has us wondering, have fake accounts or false info that's filling your feed got you frustrated? We'll take your calls, 313-577-1019.
Up next, a big chunk of Detroit residents have college degrees, but efforts are underway to change that. A big chunk of Detroit residents do not have college degrees.
Thanks for that correction,
Tia.
Tia.
Let's get in there. They do not have college degrees, but there is an effort underway to change that. And we'll look at some of those projects next. We'll be right back on the Metro. You all stay right there. Welcome back to the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Getting into college has only gotten more competitive in recent decades. That's in part because of the cost and because it's a lot harder to get a decent paying job without a college degree. For students in Detroit, the barriers to entering college and getting a degree are often higher than most. A big chunk of city residents do not have college degrees themselves, and that helps explain why the median income is about $37,000.
That is right, Robin. But Bottom Line Detroit wants to change that. At the end of last year, they launched a program to partner with several Detroit schools to help students get into college and succeed while they're there. To discuss that new program now, we have Danielle North here. She is the founding executive director of Bottom Line Detroit. Danielle, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here and love your intro with all of the stats and facts. Love it.
I was going to say that's Robin. She loves the stats and she makes sure they're factual. So I love that so much, Robin.
Thanks, Tia.
You're welcome. But it's important. But why did you all decide to partner with Detroit schools? We all know about the history of Detroit public schools and the kids that go into these schools and some of the not so great things that we hear. So why did you guys decide to partner with the schools?
Well, Bottom Line is a 27-year-old nonprofit focused on helping degree aspiring students get into college, graduate, and go far. And that means helping them graduate with less than $19,000 on average of debt and getting them into mobilizing careers. And so partnering with Detroit schools, with me being a first-generation college graduate, seeing, snaps, seeing the impact of my college degree and where it brought me and my peers, it was a no-brainer to partner with schools and nonprofits who are already doing so much of this work to make a difference in the lives of young people. And we were invited in to help contribute to the work that's already going forward. And so really excited for the opportunity to make a difference.
And you talk about being a first generation college student and going back to when you first entered college to where we are today. What were these things that we didn't even think to ask first generation students then versus now? We know what to do a little bit more, but what were some of those things that just didn't even know to ask the question?
Absolutely. So when I think about the core methodology and the theory of change with Bottom Line, it is those exact things that we didn't necessarily ask or work on. And so we help students develop lists of schools that align with what they're interested in learning, that align with affordability. We help them complete applications. We help them write essays, and we help get them to a decision. For me, it was kind of very basic. Like, I didn't have a lot of choices, but I thought I did. I remember talking to my counselors like, oh, I want to go to Cornell. And it's like, I was very smart, but I so could not go to Cornell. But that conversation was not there to say a realistic conversation. Here's how much it costs. Here's what your grades need to be. Here's what the SAT scores need to be in order for you to get into a school. And here are the programs that they have, right? And so once I learned more and had more time and experience, which created more of a meandering path, going to community college on scholarship with my good grades and my ACT scores that got me into that program and then ultimately into a 4-year college program. But I was learning as I was going. So we're helping students formulate their questions and ask the right questions and get them on the right track, and they are aligned with an advisor that supports them all the way and up to 7 years. So even for us, I had a counselor in the beginning, but I didn't have someone who stayed with me while I was in college. No one to call back to when I was messing up my scholarship to say, hey, what are my options here? What can I do? I was really kind of muddling my way through, and thank God, here I am today, really excited. I made it through, but we want kids to have less to struggle through, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the less of that worry and just, I know I'm going to go. I don't have these challenges or barriers. I can just coast through, basically. Of course, hard work, but I can kind of coast through without those challenges and extra things that are heavy on my mind. So Danielle, you were talking just a little bit about, some of the things that you all were noticing, how you helped build them up and how you helped implement them into the programs that we all see today across the city of Detroit. But I want to know about the challenge that students face. You talked a little bit about, but returning home after school. There's always that idea that you come back home from school and everything's just going to fall into place, but it's very difficult to readjust, especially when you're coming home to the city of Detroit and you just heard some of those statistics. So can you talk about navigating life after college and in ways that even the program is helping those after college?
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, if I would start a little bit about the during college and into after with that support. And so we talk a lot about soft skills in addition to the hard skills. So the soft skills are like belonging and identity and having a sense of that. And so part of helping students make decisions about the right colleges is understanding what outcomes they have for students who look like them or come from similar backgrounds. So we work with first generation college students, low to moderate income with at least a 2.5. And obviously we have some flexibility and wiggle room with that for students. But when you think about that, group of students who are going into maybe PWIs, or even if they're going to HBCUs, it's a whole new world, right? And so we're helping them along the way with the identity, helping line them up with programs. We're not creating the programs. Programs are there. A lot of times students don't know how to tap into them and how to stay connected. So we're helping them along the way. And also, if you're a student like me, I would come home and visit a lot.
Me too.
What?
Me too.
How are you helping them? Okay, it's time to go back. You can visit home and have fun or however, but don't get stuck. Let's go back, to your 4-year university in state. And, you go back, you finish up. And then when you come out, we have a career services program that we're supporting you with along the way as well. So we're going to help point you into the proper internships or even paying jobs with our corporate partners. And then hopefully that leads to success with placement, either with a corporate or nonprofit organization partner or also into a graduate school.
And just hearing all the program and just hearing the way that you all tailored the program, especially for first generation students. But I think about, that was my question for me personally, getting out of school, and I just felt like I was floating around. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have the support there. I didn't know who to call back to.
Yes.
And so for about a year and a half, I just floated around trying to figure out what to do. And so to hear this, I hope the kids and families are listening. There are programs out there that can help, like Bottom Line Detroit. And if you are listening to the Metro right now, I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Danielle North, the executive director of Bottom Line Detroit. We're discussing its recent collaboration with Detroit schools to help students get into college and succeed while they are there. Now, you all are partnering with Northwestern, which is a Detroit public school, but a lot of the schools you're working with are charter schools. Why is that?
Yeah, and so I'll not correct you, but help share more information about who else we're working with. We're actually equally working with charter schools and Detroit public schools. I was fortunate to do a story with Northwestern, which is my alma mater, and it was really important for us to set up that hub there. But our partnerships currently are for the Detroit public schools. It's with Northwestern, the school at Marygrove, East English Village Preparatory Academy. And so we're also working with bringing in Cody and CMA to our main headquarters. So what we're doing are place-based sites and also our headquarters. And so we'll be place-based at specific schools. So those are the DPSCD schools where we will physically go there, set up shop at their schools. And then for the charter schools, we're actually only working with 2, the UPA schools and Detroit Edison Public School Academy. And so we actually have more Detroit Public Schools partners. And then for our headquarters, we're hoping to bus students from Cody and CMA for sure over to our headquarters. And we're working on some others that I can't name yet until we get everything locked in. But being a graduate of Detroit Public Schools and being a product of that school system, it was just really important to dig in deep and provide those supports on site. In the other states where we provide our programs, they have mass transit. And so they're able to, when I went to the Boston site, I saw the kids get off the Orange Line and walk to the site. We don't have that. And so it's important for us to have either be physically at the school and bring our supports there with our advisors or provide transportation to our headquarters.
Is there anything different about working with charter schools versus traditional public schools? And was there criteria that you were really thinking about when you selected both the charters and the traditional public schools?
Yeah, so for me, I'm really fortunate, and which is another reason why I was sought out by Bottom Line. It's about relationships and partnerships. So I was formerly an executive at Detroit Public Schools, and I've also been an executive with charter schools. And so I have relationships in both of those spaces. But we know historically that there have been, bumping of heads between traditional public schools and charter schools. But when it comes down to providing resources and supports to students, what I find is that is the commonality, that people want kids to succeed and they want to partner, and there is no, they don't care who, if you have supports and you actually have a proven model and you're funded to do it, they want to work with you no matter what side they're on.
When we think about preparing kids for school, for university, for colleges, to go on after high school, there's a shortage of school counselors nationwide, and we know that they play a crucial role in this. Michigan has one of the worst student-to-counselor ratios, and Detroit schools eliminated many of their counselors a few years ago due to budget constraints. And I remember talking with a lot of high school students who were dealing with the FAFSA debacle. They were trying to apply for financial aid, and we know there was a new rollout of that form, and it meant that there was a lot of confusion, and a lot of kids didn't have counselors to fall back on. And we're talking about first gen kids who were like, I don't know who to talk to about this. I don't know what to do. Talk about what a counselor, the role that they play, why that's really important, and what you're noticing in the schools that you're working with.
Yes, Robin, she's got the information.
That's what I didn't. I tell you that.
Yes,
I told you that.
Okay, good. Saving me some work on my stats. Snap. That's great. Yeah, you're exactly right. And what we're seeing, for an example, the counselor at Northwestern, she is the one counselor for roughly 360 students. And so she is so excited for the support. She's doing an incredible job. A lot of the things that we implement or have in place, they have some of that, like they have a wall where they show where students are going to college, and we have a star wall where every time a student submits an application, we put a star on the wall. And so there is a culture that they're building around that. They have, they also have, they have a program there with Central Michigan University. And so some of these schools have a lot of partners, but they may not have the actual staff on hand. And so what we're doing is coupling with these schools. And even if they have more, this model is high touch. So it's one-to-one, in person, once per month minimum meetings for 1 hour with our students. And so even if you have 2 or 3 counselors, which some of the schools we're partnering with do have more resources, in order to get to students at that rate and beginning in their second term of their 11th grade year with the summer bridge program and then working with them all through their senior year, it's just really difficult to do that alone, right? And a lot of these schools, Northwestern in particular, had they had what they were called college transition advisors in addition to the counselors, and that was funded with the ARPA funding. And so once, you know, a lot
American
of that,
Rescue Plan.
Exactly, yes. Once a lot of that funding went away, you know, people don't understand, like, those were temporary programs. So a lot of that money that was flowing, you just can't keep up with it with the current budget. And so we're just really honored to partner with hardworking people. What we see is that people are working hard. These schools are working hard. DEPSA, the UPA schools, they have things in place. They have college-going culture, but they need the support, and we're happy to work alongside them and other programs like DCAN, Detroit Dollars for Scholars, Detroit Drives Degrees. These are a lot of our other partners who are out there who have welcomed us in. We're working in partnership.
I just wanted to talk about just a little note here about counselors. I'm actually really connected with my high school counselor still. We're still Facebook friends. We still talk. She was a person I would just walk into her office every day, just talk to her, just connect with her. Yeah, so it's like when you find that and you really have that person there for you, it's invaluable. And I'm hoping that the program helps beef that up across the city of Detroit.
Yes, love that.
I mean, that's unique to you, too.
I know it is, but we had such a small school too, so she was able to connect with a lot of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still, we're still connected. Yeah.
Shout out to Dr. Cheryl Mason, who is similar for me, was one of my high school counselors, and she actually attends all of like my college access and success events. Like, she's really proud to see, and she has a pretty nice legacy of folks who are doing great things today.
Love to hear that.
Yeah.
You went to Northwestern. I wonder, when you think about Detroit schools, Northwestern and others, and the college-going culture there then, which, that means like how much students feel supported, encouraged to go to college. What was the college-going culture like at Northwestern when you were there versus what you're seeing now, and maybe in other schools as well, as if you could compare that?
Yeah, so to be clear, and I won't, aging is a crazy thing, but
I know it was just a couple years ago that you
I'm gonna
graduated
be honest,
Northwestern.
because we
but-
need to see the differences. Coming up this June, it will be 25 years since I graduated from high school. And so things were significantly different. I'm only the second person in my entire family to go to college. I was the second person. Others have come after me, but not at a great scale, right? Second person, one person before me to go to college. And in that time, for smart kids, right? I'll just use that example because I have to say that I had that privilege of, it was kind of like people expected you to turn out all right. And so my family, my mom, dad, incredible people, they just figured like, you're going to do great. There wasn't anyone saying like, did you fill out your college application yet? Did you do this or do that? I was doing it because I wanted to go, and I was coming back and sharing, or maybe not even sharing because I've always been very independent, right? But we had Compact. And what I was able to receive was a Compact Scholarship, which is now that money has been put into the Detroit Promise Scholarship. Mm-hmm. And so it's 2 years to a community college and then 2 years to a university. And that was a big thing that was talked about, at least for me, that I could see as an opportunity. I know some folks who were able to get into U of M back then, but it was just kind of, it wasn't a, like now where you see college preparatory, college going. Absolutely not. It was very much still a system where they were pushing careers as well. So Votech was huge. So, people were going into cosmetology. People were going to the military. So there was just a wide range of opportunities, but no one was saying to me, Danielle, you must go to college. If you don't go to college, here's what your potential salary, earnings, whatever. It wasn't until I was working full-time at Health Alliance Plan with a bunch of very educated Black women and men who had bachelors and masters. And I was going to community college. And when I stopped out, which I did for about a year, they were pushing me. And I had a really great job, but they were like, this is not it. If you go to college, they told me this. I never had anyone to tell me this because I was making more money than adults around me when I came out of high school. So these people were saying, if you go to college, your earning potential is going to exceed where you are now. So I was having those real conversations, and it really inspired me to quit my job and go away to Central Michigan University and complete it because I saw it. I could see it with my own eyes. I was exposed like, oh, there's more. There's even more than this. There's more than, like, I had my own apartment. I had a new car. So look, I thought I was doing it. Okay. Look, this is, I'm doing it. But they were like, there's more. And boy, were they right.
In the last 30 seconds that we have, Danielle, what is your advice for first-generation students to go from accepted to graduated?
Wow. So it's a matter of taking it one day at a time, one step at a time, being transparent about your struggles, being transparent about what you're going through in that moment. Don't pretend like you've got it. Don't pretend like you are passing in your classes and everything is okay. Share your struggles with someone and get the support that you need. And for those who are in Bottom Line, we are going to be on you. We are going to be asking you about your struggles. We're going to find resources and other people who can link up with you at the university level. You're not going to be out there on your own. We have partnerships with the universities, and we will support you through those struggles.
Danielle North is the executive director of Bottom Line Detroit. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me.
From the WDET Newsroom, Detroit plans to open 8 new technology repair centers where residents can bring in broken laptops, phones, and other smart devices to fix. And Stellantis says it will build the next generation Dodge Durango in Detroit. The automaker also pledged to produce a new mid-sized truck at an idle factory in Illinois within 2 years. The United Auto Workers threatened to strike if the company didn't open the plant in Illinois.
Coming up at 11, we will discuss how social media platforms are regulating or not regulating false information. Have those fake accounts or false info on your feed frustrated you, duped you even? Call us at 313-577-1019. And up next, we don't have to tell you, Detroit is a delicious city. It is. And multiple eateries and chefs in Metro Detroit are now in the running for a James Beard Award. We'll dig into the semifinalists. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. A James Beard Award, it's a major honor in the culinary world. These awards recognize innovative chefs and restaurants, especially those who've shown a commitment to community, equity, and sustainable practices. The foundation just announced semifinalists, and multiple Michigan restaurants are on the list. They include some of our neighbors here in the Cass Corridor, Selden Standard for the Outstanding Restaurant, and Vecino for Best New Restaurant. Vecino translates to neighbor in Spanish. Meanwhile, Detroit's Baobab Fair is in the running for Best Hospitality.
Yeah, Tia, it's worth noting the latter two, Vecino and Baobab Fair, speak to one of the really special aspects of Detroit's dining scene, and that is its legacy of international cuisine that immigrants have long been nourishing. Vecino spotlights the bright and inventive flavors of Ciudad de Mexico or Mexico City, and that's where co-owner Adriana Jimenez is from. Baobab Fair has introduced Metro Detroiters to the fragrant dishes of East Africa at the hands of two Burundi refugees, Hamisi Mamba and Nadia Nijimbere. Now, here to discuss these restaurants and the others that made the cut is Melody Batens. She's the dining and entertainment reporter for the Detroit News. Welcome back to the Metro, Melody.
Hello, good morning.
So first, could you tell us more about the James Beard Awards more broadly? How competitive are they?
They're very competitive, and the reason that we get so excited about them is it's truly a United States award. It's nationwide. It's named after James Beard, who really changed cooking and the way people thought about food in the 20th century, along with Julia Child and other names like this. And when you win one of these awards, your restaurant changes, your career trajectory changes. People come out of the woodwork. It really is a big impact, not just when you win, but when you're nominated. But, of course, winning is the end goal here. And I don't want to say rarely happens for Michigan and Metro Detroit, but it's, we got one last year when Sozai took home Best Chef Great Lakes, which was kind of a category that had been eluding us. So I would say Metro Detroit and Michigan is on a good it's been on a roll lately. We had 10 semifinalist nominations yesterday. In the last couple of years, we've had 13. I think in 2022 we had 16, which was huge. So we're in the mix. When for several years I felt like we were kind of maybe overlooked or weren't shining as bright within that, within those communities.
Sure, we're rightfully in the mix. Talk about the different categories. Have they evolved over the years?
Yes. Best Chef Great Lakes used to be called Best Chef Midwest. And now it's Great Lakes, which really focuses on our biggest competitor, Chicago, but also chefs in Indiana and Ohio. And like I said, we won this last year. This year we have 5 semifinalist nominees in a pool of 20. And then in April, that will get winnowed down to the final list of nominees. So I'm sure we'll have at least one in that list. This year we have Chef Javier from Barda, Barda has been a nominee before, but not in this category, which is kind of interesting. And chefs at Ladder 4 Wine Bar, Miss Kim in Ann Arbor, Cook's House in Traverse City, and Penny Rail Cafe and Provisions in Saugatuck. So not just Metro Detroit, not just even Lower Michigan, but all over Michigan, which I think is really exciting, and it shows that the James Beard Awards are looking at our whole state and some of these cool, smaller communities, that people kind of only think of in certain times of year. They're really looking at them as national contenders.
And then one other semifinalist that we mentioned at the top, Vicino, has been grabbing a lot of rave reviews since its opening last spring. It's in the running for Best New Restaurant. What makes this eatery special?
It's everything. It's a total package, and it's really, I would be surprised if this wasn't nominated in this category just because I gave it 4 stars. Eater gave it one of their top awards. I think Esquire listed it. Like, they've gotten some really cool national nods, as well as being beloved locally. It's everything. It's the food. It's the look. It's even like the smell of the wood fire when you walk into the place.
Yeah,
great
the
cocktails.
atmosphere. The atmosphere is really something.
Really cool stuff you don't see. You know, it's really a modern Mexico City restaurant. It's not doing a lot of things that we're used to, which I think is always exciting. And people are really digging it. Like, the food's great. Service is awesome. It's not too anything. It's just kind of all around very well-rounded restaurant.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the culinary gems of Mexico City quite sharply and brightly. You're listening to The Metro. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're talking about Michigan's new James Beard Award semifinalists that were just announced. Melody. There's also a bakery on the list that has been generating buzz. I literally was just scrolling on TikTok. We got TikTok back. But scrolling on TikTok, and I saw Secret Bakery in Ferndale. What's the secret success to Secret Bakery?
I think it's a little bit of the secretness of it. Everyone's playing along that this bakery does not exist. We don't know what we're talking about right now. We're talking about a place that just doesn't exist. But no, Secret Bakery is in Ferndale. It's on Livernois. It is open about 10 hours a week. So if you know, and if you don't, you probably show up there and it looks like this place is closed. It's run by Max Leonard, who isn't just like a guy that learned how to bake bread. Like, I think I talked to him once. He told me he rode his bike to Vermont to learn how to bake bread. Like, this guy is serious. He is committed. He is doing things with flavors and flours that we don't see on a daily basis. So I was very pleased, and I thought it was really cool that, first year open, they got nominated for Best Bakery, semifinalist nomination for Best Bakery, which is a national award. So of all the places listed, this was the only one in Michigan. And, there's nominees from across the country.
I love that so much. When you said, it doesn't exist, we don't know where it is, we don't see it. John Cena of bakeries right now. Melody, let's talk a little bit briefly here, but let's talk about what we can look forward to in Detroit's dining scene this year. I'm always on the lookout for new spots, especially ones I can afford. Nothing against fine dining, but there's nothing like finding a new place to go to that won't break your bank. So how are things looking for people who love to go out to eat but don't want to spend too much money?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a focus this year. For example, Grey Ghost is going to be opening a fast casual, pretty much just burgers, pretty much just carry out in Ferndale on Woodward, kind of in the heart of downtown Ferndale there. And I think, they could open a second Grey Ghost in Birmingham and make it just as awesome and special occasion-ish as the one in Brush Park. But instead they're like, let's give people what they really want, which is the burger. And we haven't seen the price list yet, but I assume with less overhead, no bar, and mostly carryout, it might even be a lower price point than the one downtown. But that's just an interesting way to kind of highlight what, some of the higher end places are doing in this year, because prices are going up still. And with the new, wage laws that we talked about last time, they might go up even more as we get into 2025. Another place I'm looking forward to, not necessarily on the lower end price-wise, but I think it's just kind of be more of a casual place, is Taco's Way, which will be in Southwest Detroit. This is a new restaurant coming, I think, March or April, from Chef Eddie Vargas. He's had restaurants around Metro Detroit before, and then last year he did a residency at Frame in Hazel Park, which was a huge hit. Food was fantastic, and I'm really excited for this spot. It's only 40 seats. It's going to be it's on West Verner. 3970 West Verner, actually. And yeah, like I said, March or April he should be opening, and that's definitely going to be one to look forward to.
Yes, and Melody, before we let you go in about a minute or so, what else is on the horizon for 2025? I'm hearing a little bit about Asian food halls.
Yes, we've got a couple of them. So they're redoing Noble Fish and White Wolf Patisserie in Clawson to kind of be more of a whole like umbrella of ramen and pastry and sushi. And we're seeing that they're also, they're doing that in Clawson. That's going to be coming up, I would say, probably closer to the end of the year. Those aren't closed while they're doing it, which I think is important to note, too. We're getting Sunda New Asian in downtown Detroit. It's not so much a food hall, but I think that's more of a Filipino-Asian mix right by Little Caesars headquarters. That's definitely going to be one to look out for. And Sakura Novi, which is another development that is on Grand River and Novi. They're going to have a whole bunch of things kind of all under one roof or in one plaza, a steakhouse, boba tea, a Paris baguette, lots of different, things that lean Asian and Pan Asian that will be really fun to look forward to. I think so.
Melody Bay-Ins is the dining and entertainment reporter for the Detroit News. Melody, as always, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro today.
Thank you.
The James Beard finalists will be announced on April 2nd.
Coming up at 11, we'll discuss how social media platforms are handling false information. For you, our listener, have the fake accounts or false info frustrated you? Call us 313-577-1019.
This is WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Now, have you ever come across accounts you've never followed while scrolling on social media?
Yes.
All the time. Or seen images that don't look right?
Yes.
All right. We are left wondering whether it's real or even if it's true. It seems like no matter how many friends or family members you follow, these accounts populate your timeline. We are all very aware by now that misleading and false information can spread by just one click of the share button. But this year in particular, we are re-entering an online world that leaves us all susceptible to being duped. And social media companies themselves aren't going to save us.
Tia, it does not feel good to be duped.
It does not.
CEO of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and others, announced this month the company will no longer use a third party to fact check posts online. It's switching to a community notes system instead, following in the footsteps of what we now know as X, formerly Twitter. That leaves it up to the user to decipher the veracity of the info they come across. This hour will examine how this change highlights the many different ways to monitor what we see online. Plus, we'll discuss a creative way to identify what's real and what's fake when it comes to the information that is constantly bombarding us. We want to hear from you during this hour, too. You can call us at 313-577-1019. What are you seeing on your social media feed when it comes to things that maybe just don't seem right? Joining us now to discuss this new content moderation process is Professor Anjana Susarla. She's a professor of information systems at Michigan State University. Professor Susarla, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
So typically during an election season, we talk a lot about the kinds of information we see online that could potentially be false. But we want to start by discussing the kinds of information that we're seeing every day. Can you talk about the different types of false info we're likely to be running into and maybe not even noticing it?
Oh, there's all kinds of misleading information on social media. You can have false information about wildfires, for example. You can have misleading information about maybe some effectiveness of some medicine or a drug or something like that. There can be false information about celebrities. There are all kinds of rumors, or something that says person X did something when they didn't. So it can be anything from politics to health to the consumer product safety information. Anything and everything can be misleading information if we don't have adequate filters and balances.
Professor Susarla, I'm wondering if my algorithm, is it that like this misinformation is matching my algorithm? In other words, my algorithm sees that I like to watch a lot of posts about baking chocolate chip cookies. I do. Guilty. Am I potentially going to see something that could be fake along those lines? Maybe something a little more nefarious than chocolate chip cookies, of course.
It's entirely possible. The reason is that the algorithms are primed for engagement. Whatever you find interesting, algorithm is going to serve you up those things you like in your feed. And if we don't have adequate quality filters, then it's going to be the case that you would see some things that are real, but some things that are maybe like stretching the truth a little bit, or there can be things that are outright false.
Can you talk about the filters you mentioned? What kinds of filters should people be using?
Well, typically in the types of content moderation efforts that used to exist earlier at Meta was, I would say, sort of a fact-checking. It relied on third-party fact-checking organizations. So Meta's fact-checking in US were factcheck.org and PolitiFact and Reuters Fact Check and USA Today and various organizations like that. So what happens is, if there is, sometimes maybe they can't monitor and filter each and every piece of news, but at least things that are trending and going viral, they can put it through some sort of fact check process. And so content moderation is basically just involves 3 steps. You first scan all these social media posts, and then you assess whether this is violating the platform's policy. And the third is to intervene in some way and maybe remove a post, put a warning label, or maybe reduce, the extent to which it can be trending or something like that.
Can you talk about who or what is and are behind these posts?
The reason things can go, can be misleading, there's just too many different motives for which misinformation can spread. Sometimes people are trying to monetize misleading posts, and they just are designing content that will go viral. So maybe it's not intentionally, they're not trying to mislead, but they're ending up misleading. The other kind can be folks that are trying to intentionally spread false information and try to benefit from that. So, and I think the third category would be folks that are, without realizing it, something looks interesting, so you're sharing it, so you're kind of contributing to the spread of misinformation.
What's the engagement like for a lot of these pieces of content that we're talking about? Does it seem like users are taking the bait?
I would say, unfortunately, it seems the case. That seems to be the case in several situations. The content that is kind of designed to be viral, what looks catchy, people are more likely to share it. And there's a tendency where something that looks kind of more controversial is more likely to spread through social media. So in some sense, all these algorithms are kind of almost primed for, things that will go viral. And so we can end up having some misinformation as a result.
You're listening to the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We are talking with Professor Anjana Susarla. She's a professor of information service systems at Michigan State University. We are discussing the potential ways social media apps moderate their content. Now, how efficient is a fact-checking process, and does it actually help reduce the spread of misinformation? So we know that Meta, formerly Facebook, as well as X, they're getting rid of this process. So what does this actually look like, and how does it help reduce the spread of misinformation?
How does fact-checking actually work?
Yeah.
Well, fact-checking, I think the studies show that at least fact-checking partially works, right? It may be kind of challenging to get the truth out and correct the record, but if you do, some independent groups are verifying selected article, and the platforms do some sort of I guess they try to do some content moderation. The studies show that some sort of fact checks do reduce false beliefs, and not just in the United States. Even studies have shown all over the world that fact checking is kind of a very important tool in the fight against misinformation.
And when we talk about the crowdsourcing moderation, a more efficient way is it a more efficient way? Are we going to see it be a little bit, I don't know, I guess we see more myths dispelled or more misinformation kind of regulated when we see it happening through a crowdsourcing moderation way?
I think crowdsourcing of content moderation is not bad by itself. It can be very valuable, right? But there are two issues to note. One is, if we are relying on the crowd to check the accuracy of information, it could be sometimes a very slow process. And during that time, misinformation can spread very rapidly. So one is the speed with which misinformation. Can crowdsourcing be effective at the same rate? The second problem with crowdsourcing, it's not so much of a problem, but you really have to set up a system where people feel that they're contributing value to the platform by performing this kind of fact-checking service. So it's like a Wikipedia kind of model, if you will.
Yeah, I was literally going to say, it sounds like the Wikipedia model.
Yes, exactly. So how do you get the same sort of model to work for, Facebook or Meta? That's the question.
Yeah. And, we just talked a little bit about Wikipedia. That's one of the best examples we have right now. But do you have any idea, or in your opinion, what are some of those ways that we can see it working for a Meta or a Instagram?
I would say it will be ideal to have a mix of content moderation policies. There may be some situations where fact-checking through crowd can be very valuable by, providing a lot of background context and detail. There can be other things where just a fact-check label can be helpful as well. And there are, other kinds of moderation. Platforms like Reddit have somewhat of a decentralized, different kind of moderation. So there's a lot of different approaches out there.
You're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking with Professor Anjana Susarla. She's a professor of information systems at Michigan State University. We're discussing the potential ways social media apps moderate their content or not. Professor Susarla, you mentioned Reddit. Something that I appreciate being a Reddit user myself is whenever someone brings up an issue or a topic matter that perhaps could have some threads of misinformation. Maybe someone's talking about a health issue. They're talking about, let's say, vaccines. They have this bot, this automatic bot that comes up and says, you have just said words that have flagged me, this auto-moderated bot. And the bot will then lay out pieces of information so that there's not a lot of room for users in that discussion to hopefully debate the parts of the discussion that are really factual. Hopefully that's making sense what I'm saying here.
Yes.
Can you talk about more about that model? Is that something we should be seeing on Facebook and some of these other giants?
Well, I think one of the things that studies on Reddit have looked at is, what happens if there is some sort of political biases, let's say, in the content moderation, right? So if the moderator doesn't agree with some of the content of what is being said by the Redditors, is that going to bias some of these content moderation efforts? So will that sort of thing happen if we have, on Meta, if we adopt these crowdsourced models? Is that going to be that some types of information are more likely to be flagged as problematic and others will be not seen as problematic? Will we create newer kinds of biases is what I'm trying to say. Right? And I don't know the answer. Yeah, I want to give benefit of doubt to Meta and Mark Zuckerberg, but I'm just speculating. We don't know if this kind of moderation will introduce newer types of content moderation challenges.
We're wondering about you, our listener. Do you trust what you're seeing on your social media feeds? You can give us a call, 313-577-1019. Professor Susarla, a lot of this conversation comes back to the trust we have in certain institutions to provide the truth. Can you talk about how that has changed, how that has evolved?
Yes, I think this is a very big part of, how much do we trust social media platforms to kind of, serve the public interest, as it were. So maybe this is not just confined to social media platforms, but is a general rule. Do we trust our, institutions of the press and other the people we rely on to tell us, what's going on? So I think that may be a larger question than, what social media platforms alone can do. But I think social media platforms do have one issue. Across the board, engagement has kind of plateaued on all the social media platforms, right? So millions of people are still using social media, but the growth is not as it used to be, like this exponential growth, and we no longer are seeing that. So then it's a question for the social media platforms. What do they do to regain that kind of trust from the public?
That's interesting, Professor Susarla. So in your view, do you think some of these efforts to loosen regulations, are they also an effort then to gain back more engagement?
It could be. From their perspective, they think that this is, probably better. It may lead to more engagement, but then we have to see then, how things will shape up in the next year or so. Will we go back to Facebook or Instagram or all these Meta-owned platforms? Will we see a lot of robust engagement? And will the growth continue like it used to be in the past?
What would it look like for the government to step in and enact some regulations? I don't think we're going to see that, given the Trump administration is pretty anti-regulations, and we saw so many of the most powerful tech giants front row and center at Trump's inauguration. But what would that look like, and is that, do you think, taking it too far?
Well, there are, I think the states like Texas and Florida definitely don't want social media platforms to engage in content moderation. So I think those states have certain regulations, and maybe that could be the model now for all of United States, right? So maybe...
What do those regulations look like? Can you give us an example?
I know that there was a Supreme Court case called Moody versus NetChoice, and that talks about, do large social media platforms there's some laws that regulate these platforms. Would they offend the First Amendment, right? And I think that Supreme Court found that essentially they did not kind of give any categorical, they just remanded it to the lower court. So basically, they rejected the state's assertion that content moderation raises issue for the First Amendment. That's kind of broadly how the Supreme Court ruled in 2024 July. So what does that mean for all of us right now? I think that social media platforms still do have some ability to regulate what we see is as free speech, right? And they still have that power. What are they going to do with that power? I do not know. And I know that from a business perspective, they do need to increase engagement because that has been a challenge for them.
Okay, I'm curious now, Professor Susarla, what your social media feed looks like and how I'm hoping you're going to tell me that it is devoid of misinformation, and then you're going to tell us how to all protect ourselves.
I wish I had silver bullet, but I am extremely careful what I see on social media, what I engage with. And the reason is, as a researcher who studies misinformation, I am very wary of what people post and things going viral. So I would just offer two suggestions. One, when you see a post which is trending, always watch for where is this content coming from? Is this from an official news source like the Associated Press? Then we
or
know
NPR or WDET. Yes.
Exactly. And we know that you guys have done the fact checking. We know we can trust you, right? And the second, just think before you share something, right? So do not share, just be careful with your likes and share buttons.
Okay, we will keep our fingers a little bit lighter around those likes and share buttons. Anjana Susarla is a professor of information systems at Michigan State University. Professor Susarla, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll discuss what it takes for us to really learn how to identify false information online. And we still want to hear from you. Have fake accounts or false information on your feed frustrated you? Give us a call and let us know, 313-577-1019.
This is the Metro on WDET. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about how the content on our social media feeds is moderated or not. It's not a one-size-fits-all system, and it will require more work from us, the social media users, to know what's real and what's fake. And we want to hear from you. Are you frustrated with your social media feed nowadays? How much of it is flowing with misinformation or fake accounts? Call us. The number is 313-577-1019.
Well, Robin, before we get back to it, my Twitter, I did delete X about 2-3 weeks ago.
No kidding.
Yeah, the feed was way too, it was just like
bots and bots and bots.
Yeah, there was bots, there were ads, and it was so much negativity. I just had to get away from it. No matter what I did, no matter what I liked, the feed wouldn't change. So I just said, I think this is what X is descending into. So
into a hellscape.
It is what it feels like right now. So I had to get rid of that, get away from it. And now we're doing Blue Sky. Let's see how that works. Let's see how Blue Sky works.
It's an experiment, but still, even for us, people who are trained to identify misinformation, who put all of the work that we put out on WDET, we put it through so many rigors, editorial rigors. We have so many eyes looking at everything and fact checking everything. And So even for us, though,
No, it's still a struggle.
you can still get duped, even the trained eye.
Yes, it's still a struggle. So it's very, very important that you have multiple eyes and multiple folks trying to make sure that we're dispelling and repelling some of this misinformation.
But it's not happening apparently anymore, at least at Meta.
And X already had gotten rid of it. So you saw what happened with X. Like I said, that's why I got rid of it, because you saw it descend into chaos, into just madness. So I had to get away from that. And I now believe Facebook, which is already pretty much the Wild Wild West, would disappear, or it's going to kind of descend into that as well. So
Fascinating.
Well, we are joined right now by Sue Ellen Christian. She is a professor of communication at Western Michigan University. She created Wonder Media, Ask the Questions. It's an interactive exhibition that was located at the Kalamazoo Valley Museum in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Now you can find it online. Professor Christian, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks, Tia. Hi, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Professor Christian, let's start with your social media feed. What is it like? What do you put in your filters to get it off of your feed?
Robin, was it you just saying that you got off of X?
That was me.
Tia.
Yeah, that was
Okay,
me.
Tia. Sorry, Tia. Beg your pardon. I am contemplating the same thing, and even thinking about quitting Facebook, which I really enjoy for keeping connections with folks who I don't usually see. But just like Dr. Sue Sarlo was saying in your previous segment, her social media feed. I try very hard to not click on and share, frankly, strong opinions either way. Yeah. I'm trying to teach my algorithm that I like things that are informative or that are personal sharing, like the family pictures and things that I can't get, frankly, from the news media. I can only get that from personal connection. And so it is very hard to rewire an algorithm. And in fact, a fun thing to try and do is to fool the algorithm by, really mixing up who you're following, just sort of shaking it up. I think that we are only our information in our social media feeds is only as good as the current algorithm of that platform, and unfortunately, we are not privy as users to what that algorithm is. We don't know what's being prioritized, although certainly platforms, if they chose, could be turning Tia, your ex, and you wouldn't have left it. They could have chosen to make an algorithm that prioritized, for example, positive information, yes, or prioritized information that had been vetted and shown to be credible. So platforms do have power in the way that they toggle the algorithm to what they prioritize and what we see.
And that's why I have stuck to with TikTok for the most part. It really does learn you. It figures out what you like, what you don't like, and it just gives you what you need. But that's also a problem. I can see
what you need.
Yep, I can also see it as a problem because you're in a silo now, and you're only getting the things that you want to see, and sometimes it may not be the best things to see. So it's a slippery slope. When we talk about the algorithm, feeding it, how to feed it, what to do with it, and tips on ways to, I guess you can say, change it up. But ultimately, it's sounding like a lot of us are just saying, hey, it's time to put social media down. But Professor Christian, when did you recognize we needed more tools to help people navigate these online systems?
I would like to, yes. I realized it about a decade ago, but I feel that I do believe in the power of users to, as Dr. Susarla was saying, we need more engagement. The platforms need engagement. They need us. And what my work tries to do is empower users. You have folks out there listening. You have power. It's the same thing as a boycott. It's the same thing as choosing to support a local business or not. The point being, what you choose to click on, you're going to get more of. But also, what you choose to share is what's populating our feeds. Now, certainly, as we just talked about, the algorithms will prioritize certain information, and we can't do anything about that. But instead of ceding the power to the platform, I when we think about the millions of people who are on social media every day, every minute, and particularly young people, 2 to 3 hours a day on average, that's on average, that's a lot of time and attention. And where are we putting it? And so trying to empower folks, my work tries to empower folks that you do have choices, whether it's to change a platform, whether it's to unfollow someone or to choose to not share someone, that concept of think before you click, think before you share. But also, you have power as a consumer in terms of informing yourself about selecting credible information. So, as a consumer, what I try and teach my students in my media literacy class, in the book that I wrote, Everyday Media Literacy, the museum exhibit, and now the website that's available to everyone in use in public libraries in Michigan, and we're rolling it out nationwide in the next year. And it's free to everybody, media literacy, wondermedialibrary.com, I beg your pardon, wondermedialibrary.com. The idea is you, the user, can have a positive experience online by choosing to take control. You have choices. You can choose to put the phone down, for example, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling like, boy, the negativity, as Tia was mentioning, is just overwhelming.
Tia, we're looking at you and we're
Put it
talking
down.
about TikTok.
Put it down. I know.
Put it down. Because community notes are only as good as the community correcting and adding context. So we're talking about X and we're talking about Facebook now doing this community notes and the wiki model. It's only as good as us, as the people online. And so what I'm trying to do with the website and an album that we have forthcoming in late spring is that's about media literacy and media literacy content and concepts, and then a musical is to empower people to understand how to correct the record, to manage the responsibility that is being online. No more can we just sort of tune in and, Walter Cronkite's going to tell us at 6 o'clock what we need to know and how we need to know it.
Professor
Those
Christian,
days are over.
I love that so much because I know before we get to the end of our conversation, we're going to talk about that exhibit and listen to a little bit of that music as well a little bit later on. But we do want to get to the phones because we have folks who want to talk to you. So, Lana in Waterford, what's frustrating you about social media right now?
Okay, so there's a lot of these swap groups, and in these swap groups, local swap groups, you will see ad agencies making these very sad, they don't appear as ad agencies. They appear as people sharing these posts for missing children or missing pets, and they'll make up this very sad story. They'll get all of these shares, they'll turn off comments, and once enough shares are obtained, they change the post to an ad. And it's extremely frustrating. It happens all the time. And I don't think people realize most of the time, obviously, that it's fake. And I see it all the time. So what you want to do, obviously, is go to the profile and vet it because it's usually pretty easy to tell what's fake and what's real. But it's very frustrating.
Lana in Waterford, thank you so much for calling. Professor Christian, how hard is it to differentiate between an ad and a post from a real person?
Lana, thank you for that observation. And also, you just brought up some themes, Lana, that we've all experienced. One, you're on a site for a completely different reason. You're looking to swap something, and suddenly, kind of out of left field comes this, poor lost dog or adopted child or what have you, as you were mentioning. And so, one, our defenses are down. Our focus is on swapping, not on this other thing. And so, so much of what we as users now, we need to be more vigilant. We need to be more skeptical. And what Lana identified is, obviously you figured it out, Lana. You figured out, wait a minute, something's not right here. So partly just to begin to develop that mindset among all of us, I don't want to say distrustful. What I want to say is be skeptical. There's a lot of good information out there and a lot of very well-intentioned folks doing good things on social media and elsewhere online. But it is not a blanket acceptance that all things are true and everyone has a good intention. One concept I'd like to give you that Lana described without even knowing she was describing it, to get a little bit eggheady on you for just a second.
Please.
One of the media literacy concepts is that most messages are created for profit or power. And that profit, by the way, can be good profit. It could be a nonprofit raising money for folks who have been devastated by the fires in Southern California. So it doesn't have to be bad, but just knowing that most messages are for profit or power. And power, by the way, can be a persuasive power. And in Lana's example, what she's describing is a little bit of both. They're trying to make money off you. It's an advertiser, but also to persuade you initially to click on that. Do you follow me?
Lana, you still there, Lana?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
No, it's awful. They make up these very super sad stories, so it makes you feel bad. It makes you feel, oh, well, the least I could do is share. And a lot of people do. It works. But, it's really kind of cruel.
And Lana, really quickly, how has this changed your social media habits? And have you considered quitting social media or some of those sites like I have?
Yeah, I left the swap groups. I mean, I'm in some of the local city groups, but I don't participate in the swap groups because I feel like there's just so much of that. And then I see my friends sharing it, and it's really frustrating. So I just left.
And Lana, really quick, are you thinking about just leaving a site? Are you on multiple socials like I am? And are you just thinking about consolidating and maybe keeping just one or two?
Yeah, I'm just on Reddit.
Okay, yeah.
And Facebook for like friends, photos. I like seeing my family's photos and stuff like that, but not really for news.
And listeners, if you are interested in joining into this conversation, letting us know what your relationship is with socials. Have you considered quitting social media apps? Or maybe you made the jump. Give us a call. Let us know. 313-577-1019. Thank you, Lana, so much. And you're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET-FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about misinformation and social media. And again, we do want to hear from you. Have you quit social media apps recently? Are you contemplating it? Call and let us know. 313-577-1019. We're talking with Professor Sue Ellen Christian from Western Michigan University about how she turned news literacy into a museum exhibition. We're going to get to that exhibition in a moment, Professor Christian. But I'm wondering what initially inspired you to pursue creating work that informs people about news literacy.
Thanks for that question. My background is as a journalist, both educationally and then professionally. Most of my time was spent at the Chicago Tribune covering government and politics. And when I made the move to academia and joined Western Michigan University's faculty, one of the things that was really striking to me was that journalism was misunderstood in the way that by the general public, now that I was sort of a member of the general public.
Yes.
And you all can both probably really appreciate this, and the folks at WDET on the news side, and that is that we go through a lot of steps before we publish work, before you present information to your audience. And I realized journalists need to be far more transparent about how we select a story, why we select it, what audiences we have in mind, and who we are talking to, that idea of whose story gets told, and then how we're telling that story. These are all questions that honest and credible news outlets struggle with. But I think that journalism has let others tell our story. And so that is really what became the impetus for me to begin to study media literacy. And depending on who you talk to, media literacy may have as a subset or a cousin news literacy. Some view it as very separate entities. I focus on both, and my website focuses on both.
Professor Christian, it reminds me of a time that I was working from home and something in my apartment, in my bathroom, had stopped working. I think the sink might have been leaking, and a super came in and he was working to fix it. And I happened to be on a call with my editor. We were working through a feature story that I was filing for KUNC in Colorado, a public radio station in the Mountain West. And so I was on speaker, and the super heard everything that was being said. He heard my editor saying, "Are you sure that that is exactly what this person said? Are you sure that that is exactly what he meant?" And then line by line, he's interrogating every single sentence in my script to the point where you might think I would be getting frustrated. Of course, I loved it. I loved every moment and every question he had to ask me. And afterwards, the super was like, I had no idea. I had no idea that this was part of the journalistic process.
That's just a great story, but that so I think the more that we can all be doing that within, local and news organizations and beyond, to tell our story. Here's why we think this story was newsworthy. Here's what we still don't know. That is so important to say what we don't know. Here's what we're finding out. It's in the beauty of digital media is we can keep updating. And oh, by the way, if we make a mistake or if we misquote, God forbid, we can correct it and put a note at the top. So that idea of being transparent when we mess up and also transparent about what we don't know helps build credibility. And I hope that we haven't lost only about, I think we're at our lowest level in terms of trust in the news media. It's historical low. About 32% of Americans trust news reporting, according to the American Press Institute.
Yeah, and part of that is because we are lousy at explaining our process. So we appreciate people like you who are working on that. Let's go back to the phones. Ryan in Detroit, have you considered quitting social media?
Hello. Yeah, I'm taking a break right now. I just recently uninstalled Instagram and Facebook from my phone. And I did it for two reasons. One, because I was noticing my own time was spent, was too much on social media. So I wanted to take a break for me. And two, like I'm sure a lot of people notice on things like Facebook, you're starting to see so many things that aren't those friends that you are connected with in real life or connected with at some time. And it just becomes all of these other things that have no connection to my life or the people who I care about. So taking a break.
Yeah, a social media diet, Ryan. I have done the same thing and it's felt really good. Unfortunately, I'd say that my job doesn't allow me to stay off social media for too long. Professor Christian, what do you think? Are breaks from social media a good way to clear one's head and to return with a fresh perspective?
Yes, and kudos to you, Ryan, for knowing that it wasn't helping and supporting the way that you want to live and your mindset. That can be really hard to do because social media is built to keep you coming back and to give you the dopamine hit. And that sort of idea of the intermittent reinforcement. Will someone have liked my last post? I better check again. The notifications. All of those things are things that we can toggle. If you don't want to go cold turkey like Ryan, if you don't want to take an outright break, you can do things as a user to reduce the presence of social media in your life, like setting a timer so the alarm's gonna go off after 30 minutes on Instagram, and yes, you can override it, but hopefully if that's your intention, it's helping you to nudge you to walk away. Things like a grayscale, not using it to start your day and not using it to end your day. And
Tia Graham,
turning that
I'm looking back at you
As soon
again.
as you said that, Professor Christian, I looked at Robin and she's looking at me, and I just thought, why?
I'm mean mugging Tia right now across the table here because she is
my
right now being
Lanta.
tasked with waiting 10 minutes before waking up. Were you able to do that today, Tia?
Yes, I was.
You did the
yes, longer than 10, like 30 minutes this morning.
Very good.
Bravo.
30 minutes.
Bravo. Ryan, thanks so much for calling the Metro. The phone lines are open. We want to hear from you. Have you considered taking a break from social media, or maybe you quit? What's that been like? Call and let us know. The number is 313-577-1019. We'll be right back here on the Metro. Back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We are talking about our social media use. And have you considered taking a break from social media? We just heard from Ryan in Detroit, as well as Lana. Or maybe you managed to quit all together. I don't know who've managed to do that, but
you're out there.
Yeah, you are.
Call.
Give us a call, 313-577-1019. The number is 313-577-1019. We are talking to Sue Ellen Christian. She's a professor of communication at Western Michigan University. So, Professor Christian, now you've developed what was initially an exhibit that explains what to do when you see strange information online. Give us the lowdown about this exhibit.
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, Wonder Media has now been converted from an in-person exhibit to a website that anybody can visit, wondermedialibrary.com. There's also still some of those exhibits in place at the Kalamazoo Valley Museum. For example, a fun digital game you can play called Escape the Fake that is you are trapped in a message of lies and deception, and you have to get out of it by answering some questions that help build your media literacy skills and knowledge. Another one is called Fact Check This, and it gets at what we were talking about earlier, Robin and Tia, and that is how journalists do their job. And we follow a journalist named Mia, who was created in part. I just want to give a shout out to some students in Detroit who, among other young people in Michigan, were part of my focus groups that helped me as I was creating the content for this site. And Edna Todd Walker of the Ebenezer Community and Cultural Center, and Dylan, Brian, Zamarian, Kimura, and Kobe all were part of my focus groups, some Detroit youths who consulted with me on how to best build a game about how journalists do their job that teenagers and adolescents would find entertaining as well as understandable when it comes to learning these skills.
And, oftentimes we think about skills and learning, and it's not a fun thing to do. So in what ways did you make it, quickly, because we would love to go back to the phones before we end our conversation here. But just briefly, how did you guys get young folks to engage with the content?
Well, one, talking to folks like the folks at Ebenezer and some others in terms of what do you enjoy? What I need to teach you, for example, this concept. Here are my ideas to teach it. So I developed card games, a really fun wall game. You throw a ball at the fact and not the opinion, which is now brought to libraries with the fly swatter. You have your fact and your opinion fly swatter, and you whack your desk in your classroom or in the library. So all sorts of just fun ways to help us learn these basic but important skills.
Yeah. You're listening to the Metro on WDET Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're going to go back to the phone lines now. Elise in Ferndale, have you quit social media? Is it making you pull your hair out?
Hi. I actually have quit social media involuntarily. I got hacked a couple months ago, and everything got reconciled with that, and I thought I was back on track. And last week, out of the blue, all my accounts were disabled from Meta, and no warning. You know, I think it's just catching up. The hacking caught up to me. A lot of stuff went on with that was totally out of my control, but I got broken up with involuntarily, and I'm actually kind of grateful.
Talk about how it feels. Are you feeling this newfound freedom?
Well, I will be honest. I had a couple of days of withdrawals, like for sure. I was feeling weird, you know. But then I realized, you know, I'd been spending too much time on social media, just like everyone has said, and it was just kind of getting bogged down with junk. And so I kind of got through the tough spot. I felt like I detoxed a little bit. I've read 3 books in the last week, and I'm adopting a kitten. So
in the last week, you've read 3 books.
Yeah,
and you've adopted a kitten.
She's getting a kitten.
We all. Okay, we're learning something from you, Elise.
Yes.
Our lives, we could turn them around within a couple days of quitting social media.
Oh, Elise, you just gave me hope. I'm getting a kitten soon too.
Elise, thank you so much for calling the Metro. We want to stay with the phones. Brian in Detroit. Have you quit social media? Are you looking for kittens? Are you reading multiple books right now?
Oh, no, I never joined social media. I'd never done any of that. I watch the regular news, watch regular TV, listen to you guys, I go to the movies a lot and actually talk to people face to face.
Okay,
That's beautiful.
You're a specimen we must study. Tell us more. How did you not? How'd you manage to stay away from social media?
Well, I thought about joining. Remember when MySpace way back 100 years ago? I thought about that, but I never did. And then Facebook came along. I thought about that, but never did. And then all this other garbage came along. Just never did. Didn't really. I'd rather talk to people. I'd rather talk to people face to face than to stare at a phone.
That is a beautiful sentiment, and I'm going to keep that front and center. Professor Christian, in the last 30 seconds we have, you mentioned, you know, you're thinking about maybe getting off some of the social media sites. When's the last time you did a full social media purge, a diet of sorts, a break?
I am not on very much. Like you, I feel like I have to be on because of my work. But I couldn't. I literally went to get off Facebook and try Blue Sky. And I looked at Blue Sky really closely and I thought, I'm not sure if I'm just switching one problem for another.
Kinda.
So I have to be honest that I don't post often, but I'm still in the mix.
Okay, still
Just
in the
trying to
mix.
be smart about it.
Right, we're all trying to stay above water in the mix. Sue Ellen Christian is a professor of communication at Western Michigan University. Professor Christian, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you. And
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Have a great day.